Hey, this is Paul with Make Use Of, and today we're talking about the Hollyland Lark 150, a wireless transmitter, receiver, and microphone combo that targets itself at content creators on the go. And although this is a review specifically looking at the Lark 150, it's hard to deny that its biggest competitor is going to be the Rode Wireless Go 2, which is what you're also hearing on the other channel. Now, before we continue with the outdoor sound quality and range test, let's go over some of the key features with the system. To start off with, you have this very unique and rather large charging case. One of the cool things about it, in addition to housing your two transmitters and your one receiver, is the fact that it actually charges everything in one location. The top of the case has this really nice foam padding here to protect and keep everything snug. When the case is closed, nothing is actually rocking around or moving at all. There are magnetic clips that allow the two transmitters and one receiver to just slide and stay in place. And of course, it allows everything to charge using just the one USB-C cable on the back. This is where we start to see some of the conveniences with this system, but also in a couple ways, some of the limitations too. You do have a large box, and one of the downsides to that is it's going to be a little less portable and a little bit harder to pack if you're trying to minimize the space and weight. And so with the A7S III still recording now, we have the receiver going directly into it, and we have our two transmitters, and the Rode still recording. We're going to be listening to the two different transmitters. One's going to have the lapel, and for the second one, I'm just going to directly attach to my shirt like I'm doing with the Rode. Perhaps not the most scientific way to do this, but it's going to give you a three-way comparison indoors using this microphone system. So of course, you've got your two transmitters and your one receiver. The system has less than 5 milliseconds of latency, and it's supposed to have stable range up to 100 meters. Something that I actually like about Hollyland's site and description of the product is that they actually advertise and state that it can go up to 20 meters with the back turned and still have a stable connection. I don't think I've ever seen any other manufacturer talk about its stable range with your back turned. So when we go back to our outdoor test and you see that, that's probably about, I think I said about 50 feet. So that makes sense. They claim that this is the lightest and smallest transmitter ever. And yes, while they're both in hand, I can notice the difference there. It's not that significant that it would make me want to get one system over the other, but it is still cool to point out. Internally, it has this anti-vibration chamber, what they call it. And basically it's supposed to help mitigate any bumps and jumps, the microphone picking that up. In terms of recording modes, pretty standard. You can either do individual mono tracks for each of the transmitters, you can do a safety track and stereo, and you can just do a regular stereo track as well. The benefit of using a safety track and dual channel recording is that if you do have a lot of pops or dramatic changes in your audio levels, that kind of helps you fix that in post, as it helps lower the risk of audio clipping. Obviously, one of the biggest differences is that the carrying case, as big as it is also doubling as a charging case as well as a firmware update case. So this is actually a 3500 milliamp battery built into here, so it kind of justifies some of the weight even though it's empty. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the pros and cons with having a big case like this and some of the advantages that it does offer for users and some of the reasons you might like this over a more slim, less protective case like the Rode offers. The transmitters have smaller batteries at 200 milliamps and they last for about 4 hours. The receiver, on the other hand, being that it's twice as big, has actually a much larger battery at 530 milliamps, and that lasts for about 7.5 hours. The transmitters charge to full in about 45 minutes, the receiver in about 65 minutes. The whole case charges in about 2.5 hours. The transmitters, like we said, weigh about 21 grams, the receiver 51 grams, and the case on its own 227 grams. So altogether, this is maybe about 310, 320 grams. Add all your accessories and you're probably looking at close to 350 grams with everything. For these first few tests, we're just going to be using the internal microphone just to see how far away we can get from the camera before the transmission starts to cut out. A point of reference, I think I'm about 20 feet away from the camera now, and I'm just going to keep walking backwards. Now, the Rode Wireless Go 2 claimed about 200 meters. When I did my test a while ago, I got pretty close to that. Of course, a lot of other things can come into play, including other sources of interference. Specifically in this video, we're just going to be doing the range test for the Lark. So I'm just going to continue going backwards. I'm also going to turn around a couple times. Those systems tend to cut out when it doesn't have a direct line of sight, and even just you turning your back to the camera can be enough for it to cut out. So right now, goodness, it's hard to tell, maybe 100 feet. I'm just going to be heading back right now. I think I was about 200 feet away. Coming back a little bit closer, maybe now about 100 feet away. Still talking, making conversation with you. I know the video is probably super overexposed as I'm recording in the shade, but now we're in direct sunlight, coming back towards you. And of course, at this distance, you're not really going to be having any kind of issues, hopefully. So this is where I'm just going to be kind of turning my back and walking back and forth. I think realistically for a lot of people, you're probably not going to be exceeding this distance away from your camera, especially if you're just shooting yourself. And so listening back to those recordings that we just did on that test, here are my thoughts on that. Distance-wise, I think it definitely does a good job. And it wasn't actually cutting out unless I turned my back. But again, as soon as I turned my back at about like 50 feet, it started to cut out. But even though I was about 200 feet out, so long as the transmitter was facing the receiver, audio seemed to be picked up really well. I didn't notice any interference or any issues. Let's go ahead and switch to the lapel now and try that out. It's got a small little dead cat. And then at the top of your transmitter, you have your microphone input. Kind of like any of these wireless transmitter combos, you don't have to use the lapel that comes with it. In fact, you can use any microphone essentially, so long as it has a TRS. We do have a little bit of a breeze coming through. We have some other ambient noises as well that you might be picking up. So the idea is, with this being a lapel that's directly below me, the source of audio that we want to capture, how focused in is it and how much does it isolate my voice? A lot of people tend to either love or hate the included lapels that come with kits like this. It's kind of like a kit lens that comes with your camera. You tend to only use it really when you're getting started and you're learning the system, and then you tend to either sell it or not use it that much, and then you upgrade to a better one later. In my experience though, especially recently, a lot of the included lapels with microphone systems aren't actually that bad. For these kind of tests right now, I think these microphones do a really good job. I think this is going to be one of the pros and areas that the Hollyland stands out from the Rode system, in that the Rode doesn't come with any kind of lapels. So if you are someone who wants to mic up their subjects this way using a lapel, and you just want everything to work out of the box, you don't want to have to buy anything else extra, then this would probably be the better system to choose. And so when reviewing back our recordings from both outside as well as our indoor test just now, I wasn't really able to tell much of a difference in terms of the internal microphones between the Lark and the Rode, which is a good thing because I think a lot of people do like the internal recordings that the Rode offers. And so if you've tried that before, you'll probably like this too. It'll probably come down to minor preferences. But in the post-edit, of course, that's where you can make your fine changes, whether you want it to be brighter, warmer, louder. What's important though is getting a nice clean audio source without any hissing, as well as pretty much focusing in on your voice, which again, both of those did a really good job at, even outdoors when we had some of those ambient sounds going on. And then specifically talking about the lapel, I think it sounds great as well. That's going to give you the highest quality audio, but when you're in a pinch and you just want to set things up quickly, you still get great audio internally as well. The only thing I'll add to the lapel, kind of like I was saying earlier, is I'm a little bit concerned about the longevity of this. The wire does seem to be a little bit lower in terms of physical quality, and potentially a strong pull or pinch might damage it. And so we can start to see some of the contrast between this and the Rode Wireless Go. So everything that I need for the Rode Wireless Go and then some, all the accessories I need, are actually in this one really soft case. So yes, it's not going to be as sturdy and provide as much protection, and it doesn't actually charge all the gear, but as you can see, it's actually a lot more slim. So with a lot of the bags and the things that I carry around, this can slip in to a pouch a lot more easy compared to this because of its bulky size. And in addition to that, this bag not only allows me to carry the one receiver and two transmitters, which this is normally in, it also, if I'm not using the wind muffs, will hold that. And then I have this other little bag that also came with a kit that holds all my additional wires. Now again, with the case, we understand that it has the benefit of charging everything in place. You'll also notice that it has this little compartment at the top here that you'd think could store additional accessories. For example, your TRS to TRS cable and your TRS to TRRS cable. It doesn't really have the ability to do so. If my receiver was in here, I don't think I could realistically stick in more than one of these without it, again, getting snagged on something. The only realistic thing that you can safely put in here are your dead cats. As big as this already is, I might have actually preferred if this was actually a little bit wider so that I could actually house and store all my additional accessories in one location. Although Lark does include this large bag here, which you can put your case and all your additional wire and accessories. One, it's not really the best solution, especially if you're just kind of like me. After a shoot, you're in a bit of a hurry, you just stick your lapels in there. You could potentially damage it. It's not really well protected. Although the Rode doesn't come with lapels, I would feel a little bit more comfortable throwing in the lapels here with all the additional receivers and transmitters and wires, and even though I'm just doing this quickly, I'm a little bit more comfortable with this kit still. You can see the ultimate compact size comparison here. One of the really cool things about the Lark is that you don't actually need to turn them on. They kind of auto power on the second they detect that they're no longer connected to their smart connection there. And so pulling out your transmitter and then your receiver, they just automatically turn on and pair. So in that sense, it's very quick to set up. Although this doesn't have all of the cool features that the Rode does, it actually has some very handy and in many cases better features depending on how you plan to use the system. Now, the way that I shoot, and being that I'm a solo creator that's doing the camera work, the audio work, and I just kind of want things to basically work as soon as possible with the least amount of setup. So the biggest thing that made the Rode stand out for me when I first got it, the biggest reason that I sold my old audio recorder that I was using, is the fact that even if there's audio interference, even if the transmitter has no connection to a receiver, I have the ability to set it to auto record internally, and it has that space. I'm always going to have a pretty decent recording without any worries. On the other hand, I think this kit is more targeted for people who are behind the scenes monitoring the audio, who need a more professional, easy to use, and manageable interface. And I think some of the biggest things going for this, aside from the fact that the case in a way is more reliable and ensures that your gear is always charged, provided this is charged, is the fact that this receiver has a lot more functionality and ease of use. So at the top here, you've got this really bright screen that you can really see easily even in bright sunlight. But you actually have physical knobs to make your adjustment to your levels, as well as mute your channels individually. But in addition to that, you can actually adjust the levels for each track with zero hassle. One of the things that's a little bit more tricky about this receiver for the Rode is the fact that you're basically using the same buttons to control several functions. And for example, when you're changing the audio levels, it's actually impacting both transmitters, so you can't control them individually. So that's one thing that's a bit of a letdown. And then the other weird one is choosing to switch between muting the individual transmitters also requires manually switching between them and then hitting mute, versus this, I can just hit mute. So it's much quicker. And again, the controls and the settings on here are just a lot easier. And then I think the last key difference between the two transmitters is the fact that I have a headphone monitoring output, versus on the Rode, you only have the one main output that's either going into a dedicated recorder or your camera. Going back to the transmitters again, another key difference between them, aside from the size, the fact that this can charge individually, record internally, this can actually stand vertically top side, versus this, because it actually has its power button as well as its mute, or you have the option to set this to flag or mark a track at the bottom. I never really liked that, so it can't actually stand vertically too easily unless you place it very carefully. Say for example, you just want to record audio right in front of you like this. This is going to be a little bit trickier to do. The other main difference is how the wind muffs or dead cats attach. With the Rode, you have your mic at the top there, which has a bit of a ring, and you take your dead cat, it's hard to see here, but it also has a very similar ring. You just have to twist it once, and it's attached firmly. It locks into place. With the Lark, it actually, as you can see here, has this extruded point, which actually attaches to your mic input, and you basically just push it into place. It won't twist off easily, but it is a little bit more likely to just come off. In terms of quality and how they feel though, it's smaller, but it's more dense, whereas this is a little bit more fluffy and sticks out further. Now, when actually attaching these to my shirt, they both tend to suffer from the collar pullover, as I like to call it, where because of them being top heavy in a sense, it tends to cause them to flip outwards here. One of the other advantages with the Rode systems, they have a lot of aftermarket accessories that can further enhance your experience using their products. And so to sum up, I think this system is best for filmmakers and people who are recording audio that want a very simple and reliable kit with everything included in the box, including your lapels, with easier to use and more reliable physical controls on their receiver. Probably the biggest differences between the two that might sway you to decide on one versus the other is the fact that This one case includes everything you need. It's going to charge it, it's going to update the firmware, and you know when you pull it out, so long as this is charged, everything is going to power on and connect automatically and be good to go. With the Rode, on the other hand, you're willing to sacrifice a perhaps not as intuitive and not as easy to use receiver, but in place you're actually getting a much smarter transmitter, which again can auto record internally, and you don't even need the receiver anymore. I know we covered a lot, but when it comes to audio reviews, I definitely like to get very detailed because I know there's a lot of preferences and different kind of ways that people use these systems, which I kind of wanted to touch upon a little bit just to help give you a good idea whether or not this is a good system for you. Let us know what you think about this new kit and if you think it's going to be a good fit for you. Of course, if you have any questions, you can let us know in the comments down below. And until the next one, catch you later.